Hey, something completely different. Have you tried just doing things when they're needed? I mean, wash when it's needed, not automatically. Washing the face even though it's perfectly clean. I mean, these habits are very time-consuming and absorbing. Eat when you need, not because it's tea time or time for lunch, and you must eat. I had my first wife. I mean, we used to have to go home to have lunch. Oh, it's near lunchtime, we'd better go home. I think, oh, for goodness sake, no. Let's stuff in a cheese roll and, carry on enjoying being out. What do I want to go home for? As some ritual? Some people are incredibly ritualistic about life. We think it's to do, it's order and part of the great I am. Tidiness is a nightmare if it's perfect. Goodness. Leave your hat on the chair. I mean, you don't have to go back in and put it away. You don't have to have the desk completely clear of all clutter. It just means you have to get the clutter out again in order to do your work. I mean, too much clutter, certainly. That's a problem. When you need to clear the desk, clear the desk. Don't do it perfectly. If you do anything perfectly, it's going to be at the cost of doing other things. And that's anything but a perfect overall equilibrium. Not good at all. So, simple thing. Do a thing that's needed. But the other rule is, don't do a thing that's not needed. We had a wonderful rule with Essex University when we started it. We don't make rules until they're needed. So the first person, I think I've said this before, the first person who actually copied in an exam got away with it because there's no rule against it. And then we brought in the rule. Now the trouble is, after time, the university gets like any other. It's full of rules that have been made because of various things that caused us to think we better have another rule. We need an equivalent procedure that gets rid of rules that really are redundant or in the way, causing problems. And that's not usually there. And that's the trouble with bureaucracies. They have a good way of initiating rules, procedures, protocols that are very useful, in as far as they're conceived successfully as useful. But we don't have an equivalent momentum and ability to get rid of those that are a handicap to us. And the result is, after a while, the organisation completely seizes up, of course. It not only does not achieve its original objective, it doesn't even achieve survival. And it collapses into obscurity again. And that's the way worldly organisations go, isn't it? Well, am I saying we need, and I didn't know I was coming to this, are we saying we need something from God that's going to rescue us from this dilemma? And what is that? It's a creative openness to the thoughts that come to us, isn't it? Hey, I'm not sure if this rule is really helping us. We're spending a lot of time on security. Is it still needed? Oh, I suppose we don't need the lock on that door because we've got a man working on the gate now anyway. Procedure's different. Do we still need locks on our doors when we've got cameras, after all? Well, you say yes, because the locks slow people down and the cameras simply tell you who broke in, But, we can start to initiate procedures that get rid of some of the redundancy, and not just redundant, but stuff that's now a problem to us and costly and in the way and stopping us moving forward. So, part of that is, don't do things just because you do them. Do them because they're clearly needed. And when they're needed, it'll start to press on you. Think, my goodness, it's time we tidied up the kitchen. How can I cook with all this mess around? It's time I washed up. And of course you may have a general rule which says, I don't leave dirty dishes out when I go out because it gives me a bad start when I get back. I've got to clear up the mess and I might not want to do that. So you try and make some provision for the future, but not so much provision for the future that you deny the present and therefore stop the present building for the future in the right way. but simply lock the present, lock the future into your present, which is crowding out care for the future. That's the wrong way to go. Not sure if I've said that quite right, but what do you think? I'm aware of the repetitive nature in teaching that, we say things like I'm holding forth just now on the imperfections of trying to be a perfectionist. And I've said it before, said it a couple of times over the course of these, 1,200 recordings or so. And is that bad or wrong? Well, yes, if you go into exactly the same detail as if it was some formal lesson. But perhaps if you just have a quick review of it, we know we're not perfectionists, and what the good reason is that there's too much cost in what we can't do, the opportunity cost of what we can't do now in other fields, and it's anything but perfect overall. Having given that explanation briefly again, it's a good review, isn't it? I mean, for instance, what I take as fundamental from the point of view of the spiritual life to achieve, which is to simply thank God, be in the habit of thanking God for at least all the good that you can become aware of in your life, as continually as possible, is absolutely, wonderful, miraculous in its consequences. An absolute blessing. I'm constantly saying that because it dwarfs anything else I'm talking about. Well, I'm maybe overstating this now, but not sure as I am. It really is that important to me, I think. I'm holding that to be most important at the minute, put it that way. And of course, I think for good reason, from my experience, limited though it might be. Hang on, that's just false humility. Let me get to the point. There's some things you're going to repeat very often because they are central and important as you understand it in your life. And so we are a repeat performance so often in some ways. And we try to be brief on the repeat performance where we feel people have heard it and not forgotten it. But where people have forgotten perhaps the importance of something that we hold to be important, we do say it too often, and sometimes too often. But the fact that we're saying it often doesn't mean to say that it's not important. In fact, the other way around, that we keep coming back to the central importance of some truths, some points, something that we've found in life. And because we feel it important, we say it again. It seems to be the pattern we fall into. And perhaps in some sense it's good, I don't know. But probably. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Oh yes, and sometimes it's to help the speaker himself, in that, if I repeat something like my thing I'm using as illustration here, this discourse on perfection, the imperfection of it, being a perfectionist anyway, I'm repeating it because in some sense I'm using that principle. And if I, some sense, enlarge upon what that principle is, even if it's in a minor repeat way, it gets me into the fullness of it, its application, ideally, to what I'm now talking about, and I go back to what I'm now talking about. I don't simply slot back into the old performance. So in this case, I should now review in what context I'm bringing it up, and then carry on with what I'm really trying to deal with in this recording, not what I once dealt with in discussing evils of being a perfectionist. Okay. So I might return to what my original purpose was, in the talk or the lecture or the discourse or the teaching, but I may find I've gone on to something that I didn't expect, and that eclipses my original purpose. In other words, I want to be open to God where He's leading me. I'm not just, dare I say it, I'm not sure as I should be saying this, attempting to lead you, but I'm seeking to be led, aren't I, of God? And if I'm not seeking to be led of God, well, I'm going to lead you hopelessly astray. Even if I am seeking to be led of God, I'm well able to lead you astray. Except you're pretty well defended. And don't get me wrong, some of you are, and that's good. I mean, well, I hope it's good. We live in hope, don't we? As my mum would say, we live in hope and die in despair. And it's not a biblical saying. Don't take that to heart. Where was I? Right, well, I've had a quick resume of the last bit of what I said. And the last, interestingly, I hit dead on. I didn't expect to be saying that. And what I didn't expect to be saying was, in particular, attending to the we need to be led of God. Now you might think, well, there's nothing original about this. No, that's true. I agree. But what I am just interested in is it came to me at that point and suddenly seemed to be cardinal, which I think it is, isn't it? So we're not purist in performing some particular pattern. I've come to lecture on this and therefore I'm going to lecture only on this, and will you please shut up? I don't wish to be interrupted. I may perfectly deliver my point to no point at all because you're not listening in the end, are you? Do you see? It's better to be open to what you're saying. Not so open, presumably, if I take that as my rule and perfectly follow that. So open to you that we never achieve anything. We're always talking about the cricket or something. I mean, when it's okay if your life is cricket, I suppose, but I think you get the gist of things, don't you? So, I might need to refer to a principle like not being a perfectionist. I might want to review it very briefly, but not completely. I might not. I might just hope that the reader is with me on this, the listener is with me on this, and carry on. I might refer back to my original point to make sure it's relevant, to round off the talk in some way. It's not necessarily a good habit. Don't do it if you really don't need to, or if you've got something more important that God's leading you to develop into. Tend to what God's leading you to. Sure, you might want to have some way of finding confirmation where God is leading you as opposed to where you're simply going astray. Mumbling on. That's no good, is it? Comes with practice. Doesn't just come with practice, does it? It comes also with an awareness of God, a worship of God that constantly brings you back to, what do I value? God. What does God personify for me? These qualities. Am I exercising these at the minute? Or am I just falling into some lifeless repetition or pattern? Do you see, if you like, the way the university could have had an equivalent procedure for getting rid of redundant or rules and regulations and procedures and protocols that are no longer a blessing but in fact a curse, would have been if they are centrally preoccupied with what they truly value. Then they would say, hey, why are we doing this? We could get rid of that, couldn't we? And there'd be agreement on the issue, because they would be of their whatever their perception of the godly approach is. Look, we're here to pursue truth, or we're here to lead the nation in its technology. We're not doing that if we do this, are we? We're wasting our resources on ... You know, if we're constantly alive to what our... And that, I think, is in some sense behind what an organisation does when it says, hang on, let's look at our vision here. Are we meeting our vision? What can we do to meet this vision? Yeah, fair enough. That sounds like a sort of way of getting rid of the crud, isn't it? Are we meeting our... Is this our vision now, by the way? Or are we meeting some redundant vision? Perhaps we should have a procedure for revising our mission. But don't spend so long revising it that you don't actually end up doing it, which is what we can do on many boards. We're constantly working out what our vision is and what our protocol is, and we just get bogged down in it instead of living in the present and following spiritual goals. And you know, there's a spiritual goal even for the secular organisation, isn't it? It's not so secular. You know, I mean, goodness, university is called to pursue truth in some ideal sense. I mean, you may get the politician who bounces back like Pilate and says, what's truth? You know, sardonically and negatively, of course. You know, I mean, disillusionment has overwhelmed the poor guy, given who's dealing with Caesar, who's not the epitome of God, is he? Yeah. But in some sense, you see, organisations are attempting to... I mean, it might be for profit. You suddenly realise, hang on, this isn't very profitable. Why are we doing this? Even that, you see, is some sort of step in the right direction. I mean, the goals might be a bit suspect, because profit might be. You know, you may find that your goals make you a victim of a corrupt world, rather than the handmaid of God. And you might not want to do that. You may feel you can't do anything else. Well, that's when you start to need to attend to your own spiritual well-being, isn't it? And seek out, what do you really need to be doing? Where do you really need to be happy and fulfilled? And to find that it's a blessing being a blessing. How can I be a blessing? For it's in that I find I'm blessed. You know, it's loving and caring for your family that actually brings you the most joy. Not loving and caring for yourself, after all. That doesn't mean to say you should be utterly self-effacing and a slave to other people's whims. You need to meet their true need, and their true need is to be likewise. They need to be caring for those around them. It's a spiritual life, isn't it? It needs quite a bit of input. But not so much that you stop actually doing it. You know, that you spend all your life conceiving of it, working out the right theology, never actually doing it, never actually carrying it out. Oh, well, we all know about that, I think. Well, I think we do anyway. I'm going to finish it there. Thank you, Heavenly Father.